A woman accidentally discovers that her perfect husband has another family on the side, and they even have a handsome 17-year-old son. This is yet another outrageous manga-adapted late-night drama. Its brilliance will blow your mind. The story begins with Aimi and her husband Takeo living a blissful life as a happy family of 3. Back in high school, Takeo helped Aimi retrieve her precious moon-shaped bracelet. This led them to become each other's first loves. From their first love school uniforms to their wedding gown, they spent 15 enviable years together. Aimi believed herself the happiest woman alive, until the day she accidentally uncovered Takeo's shocking secret. One day Takeo left home without his phone. As Aimi was about to return it, she glimpsed a text message. The sender arranged to meet Takeo at a jewelry store the following afternoon, though it seemed like an ordinary message. A woman's intuition told Aimi something was wrong. She remembered Takeo mentioning a dinner with colleagues tomorrow. Instead of confronting him directly when returning the phone, Aimi rushed to her best friend Reiko's law office for advice. She suspected Takeo might be up to something. Reiko dismissed it as Aimi's overactive imagination, blowing things out of proportion. The text might have been from a colleague. Takeo going to the jewelry store could be to buy Aimi a gift. Reiko declared, "Your Takeo would never cheat." Hearing her friend's words brought Aimi a sliver of comfort, yet it didn't dispel the unease in her heart. She returned home anxiously. Takeo and their son suddenly jumped out to greet her. Father and son had made her favorite omelette rice together. On the omelette rice, Takeo had written 3 words, "I love you." Seeing her perfect husband and adorable son, Aimi's doubts vanished instantly. She felt that it must have been herself who misunderstood Takeo. Yet in the middle of the night, Aimi discovered that person had messaged Takeo again. The sender reminded Takeo not to forget their meeting time tomorrow. Judging by the tone, Aimi sensed that this person and Takeo weren't just ordinary colleagues. To verify her conjecture about herself, Aimi followed Takeo to a jewelry store the next day. To her surprise, the person Takeo met was a male high school student. She watched as Takeo and the boy entered the jewelry store together to select a necklace. Seeing their intimate manner, Aimi was filled with curiosity about their relationship. She followed them to a restaurant to continue observing. Soon after, a woman Aimi didn't recognize arrived, but Takeo seemed to have known her for a very long time. Suddenly, the restaurant lights went out. A waiter brought a cake and placed it before the woman. Then Takeo and the boy happily sang happy birthday to her. Takeo even took out the newly purchased necklace and put it on her. It appeared to be the woman's birthday. To anyone watching, they looked like a happy family of 3. Aimi watched in shock, feeling her entire world crumbling. She couldn't fathom the nature of Takeo's relationship with these 2 people. Just then, her son called. Aimi had no choice but to return home, carrying her immense doubts. Early the next morning, she went to the law firm and told her best friend everything she'd discovered the night before, though she couldn't confirm if Takeo was cheating. The relationship between Takeo and that woman was definitely not ordinary. Reiko advised Aimi to first confirm the nature of Takeo's relationship with that woman. Only if he was truly unfaithful should she consider filing for divorce. Over the next few days, Aimi secretly followed Takeo daily but found nothing unusual. Just as she thought she might have misunderstood Takeo once again, that woman finally appeared. Their unrestrained, intimate behavior ignited a surge of rage within Aimi. What enraged her even more was that Takeo, the woman, and that boy actually went home together for dinner. Tears of anguish streamed down Aimi's face as she snapped photos. She had finally confirmed Takeo's infidelity. She desperately wanted to know when he had begun betraying her. So while Takeo showered, she tried unlocking his phone for clues. Yet no matter how many password combinations she tried, she couldn't access it. Seeing Takeo was about to discover her, Aimi had to abandon the phone and devise another plan. First, she sent the photos from last night to her best friend. After seeing the pictures, Reiko said they proved Takeo's infidelity. But what shocked Reiko was that the woman in the photos was actually a classmate from their high school. Her name was Junko, and Aimi had graduated the same year as her. Aimi immediately dug out her yearbook. The moment she saw Junko's photo, she finally remembered. Junko had always been around Takeo during high school. That night, Aimi tried using Junko's birthday to unlock Takeo's phone. The phone contained numerous photos of Takeo, Junko, and a young boy. Takeo had been present for every significant milestone in the boy's life. This meant Aimi had never truly had Takeo to herself. While accompanying Aimi and their son, Takeo had also been raising another child. The happiness Aimi had built over 15 years collapsed in an instant. She suddenly felt utterly ridiculous and absurd. In that moment, She vowed to make Takeo pay. Reiko discovered the boy wasn't Takeo's child. He was likely Junko's son from her previous marriage. Her best friend offered to help Aimi sue Takeo and Junko. Aimi could then receive millions of yen in alimony. Yet Aimi declared that mere millions of yen in alimony could never heal the damage done or restore the happiness she'd lost. Since the law couldn't punish them, she would exact her revenge on Takeo and Junko in her own way. Aimi planned to first break them down mentally. She applied to become Junko's son's private tutor. Aimi could confirm one thing: this boy at least harbored some affection for her. Ryota was handsome, and female classmates often admired him. Yet, as an inexperienced middle schooler, he both craved closer contact with the boy he liked and feared rejection or misunderstanding. They often require considerable time to overcome their shyness and unease toward themselves. Aimi, however, understood how to seize and create opportunities, building on the emotional foundation laid through this physical contact, and observing Ryota's nervous, evasive glances born of shyness. Aimi was certain it wouldn't take long before the budding romance would ensnare him. Her mother-in-law wondered why Aimi, who clearly had no financial need, suddenly wanted to work. Aimi explained that her son had grown up, and that her prolonged life as a housewife had grown monotonous. She expressed her desire to return to the teaching profession she loved. The mother-in-law told Aimi not to misunderstand. She had no objections whatsoever, but she wanted to know if Aimi had discussed this with Takeo. There was one thing that had always troubled Aimi: was Ryota truly her husband's illegitimate child? Ryota's English grades were less than ideal, and the final exams were approaching. Aimi wanted to tutor him privately, to make studying less tedious. She planned to set goals and rewards for him. Then Aimi's gaze fell on the game-themed keychain hanging from Ryota's backpack. She told him that she, too, played that same game. Hearing his teacher played it, Ryota's previously dull eyes suddenly sparkled brightly. Whenever games came up, the usually nervous Ryota became confident and composed. Aimi promised that if Ryota scored above 85 on the final exam, she'd gift him a set of game skins and help him level up together. In truth, Aimi had already privately researched Ryota's interests to bridge their gap. Ryota opened up and lowered his guard. The next step was to gradually delve into his family situation. Upon learning Aimi had successfully approached Junko's son, Reiko's expression suddenly turned uneasy. She vowed to assist Aimi as much as possible. Yet as someone who had witnessed Aimi and Takeo's entire journey through youth and into happiness, she still remembered Aimi's radiant smile at their wedding. Though Takeo's infidelity was despicable, she still hoped Aimi would talk things through with him, if not for oneself, then for their 5-year-old son. Perhaps moved by her best friend's words, Aimi decided to give Takeo a chance to negotiate. After this period of effort, Ryota's grades skyrocketed, smoothly achieving the goals Aimi had set for him. As agreed, Ryota successfully added Aimi as a gaming friend and received a limited edition skin. Just as he was about to match for a game, Ryota's phone rang. Takeo, upon learning of Ryota's excellent exam results, called immediately to offer congratulations. Ryota's call made Aimi realize the voice on the other end might very well belong to her husband, the one who is herself. That painful memory flashed through Aimi's mind once more. Fighting back her anger, Aimi asked Ryota if it was his father calling. After a moment of silence, Ryota told Aimi it could be considered his father, but not exactly his father. To be precise, it was a man who had cared for him like a father. Before Ryota was even born, his biological father had abandoned his mother. He had no memory of his biological father, and his mother refused to discuss him. From the moment he could remember, this man had always been by his side. Because his mother worked extremely long hours, it was often this man who cared for him. As he grew slightly older, he learned the man was his mother's boyfriend. Over time, he simply grew accustomed to their life together. Aimi forced herself to remain calm as she asked Ryota if he'd ever wondered why they never married. The question left Ryota momentarily speechless. Just then, a teacher from the guidance office notified Ryota that his mother had fainted and was currently in the hospital. Upon hearing the news, Ryota rushed out the door in a hurry. Even though Ryota had now revealed that Takeo wasn't his biological father, Aimi still felt uneasy. If Takeo found out Junko had fainted, would he be just as frantic as Ryota? Sure enough, not long after, Takeo sent a text message. He told Aimi he'd be working late and not to wait for him for dinner. Aimi couldn't care less about being at work. She turned and dashed toward the hospital. Rather than overthink, she wanted to go confirm things herself. Aimi rushed frantically to the hospital and successfully located Junko's ward. Yet, Her husband was nowhere to be found inside the room. Perhaps it was really her being overly sensitive. After all, she was just a mistress. It was unlikely her husband would abandon work to come see her. Just as Aimee was about to head back to school, a familiar figure passed by her. Perhaps in his haste, Takeo didn't even notice his wife's retreating figure as he hurried straight to the ward. Just as Aimee was about to eavesdrop on their conversation, the faculty office called, concerned about her unexplained absence. That night, after putting Yoichi to bed, her husband still hadn't returned home. She sat in the living room until late into the night. Aimee, who had originally intended to give Takeo one last chance to talk, now felt it was completely unnecessary. In Takeo's heart, a mistress and a son with no blood relation both mattered more than her and their child. She realized this relationship was beyond repair. Aimee resolved to continue her revenge in her own way. The next day, Ryota apologized to Aimee. He'd skipped class abruptly yesterday out of concern for his mother. He wanted Aimee to continue tutoring him in other subjects. His mother had likely fainted from overwork. Ryota planned to study hard and get into university to lighten her burden. After all, he was about to become a big brother. Since returning to work, Aimee had visibly lost weight. She mentioned her recent lack of appetite. Her mother-in-law thoughtfully prepared a bowl of millet porridge for her. Yet Aimee felt nauseous after just a few bites. Suspecting pregnancy, her mother-in-law urged her to get checked at the hospital. Though Aimee knew the odds were slim, Takeo hadn't touched her in ages. She still took the test with a glimmer of hope. If she were pregnant now, would her husband reconsider? Her heart was torn, knowing his infidelity. She couldn't sever a decade-long bond, yet she must continue buying groceries and cooking for him daily as if nothing were wrong. This life left Aimee utterly despondent. Suddenly, Ryota appeared behind her. Aimee marveled at their serendipitous meeting in such an isolated spot. Aimee had once mentioned living in this neighborhood, so every day after school, Ryota waited near the market, hoping to see her. Since their last conversation, Aimee hadn't been to school, and Ryota was worried. He asked if he had said something wrong last time. Aimee told him not to overthink it and to focus on his mother's health instead. Then, curious, she asked about the man who replaced Dad, and how he reacted upon learning Ryota's mother was pregnant. Ryota beamed with happiness, saying the man was even more delighted than he'd imagined. He said 9 months felt too long, and he couldn't wait to hold the baby. As for their marriage, the man had promised Ryota's mother they would definitely marry, though the timing wasn't right yet. These words struck Aimee like lightning, leaving her frozen in place, her eyes hollow and unfocused. After regaining her composure, she told Ryota she'd arrived home and hurriedly bid him farewell. That evening, when Takeo returned home, he asked about Aimee's health in a very perfunctory manner. He'd heard from his mother that Aimee had been feeling tired lately. Takeo's differential treatment made Aimee feel extremely uncomfortable. When Junko fell ill, he could drop everything and rush to the hospital immediately. Yet when it came to his own discomfort, he dismissed it with just a few perfunctory words. After much deliberation, Aimee resolved to take the initiative and personally investigate what allure this woman possessed. The moment Junko turned and saw Aimee, her natural smile froze instantly. She never imagined the real party would come knocking herself. All she could do was pray Aimee didn't recognize her and was merely passing by. Seeing Aimee's remarkably composed demeanor, her heart eased slightly. She warmly inquired about the hairstyle Aimee desired. Aimee complimented the necklace around Junko's neck, saying it looked beautiful. Junko nervously explained it was a birthday gift from her son. Aimee remarked that jewelry from that brand was quite expensive. For a high school student to give such a costly gift, he must truly love his mother. Coincidentally, her own bracelet was from the same brand. During the conversation, Junko experienced pregnancy symptoms. She excused herself to the restroom, using the moment to gather her scattered thoughts. She and Takeo had kept their relationship hidden for over a decade without anyone noticing. Why, then, did Aimee show up right after she became pregnant with oneself? Was it truly just coincidence? Yet Aimee's words always felt oddly sarcastic. Aimee mentioned how miserable morning sickness could be for women, stressing the importance of a husband's steadfast support and companionship. She recalled how her own husband's attentive care had helped her endure the challenges of childbirth. Junko replied that she was single. Aimee then asked curiously, "How did you manage to get pregnant then? Being pregnant at least means you have a stable partner, right? Isn't it exhausting for a single mom to care for 2 kids while working?" Aimee warned Junko to beware of scumbags. Most men prioritize marriage when their partner gets pregnant. That's what brings peace of mind. Junko was momentarily speechless. unsure how to respond. Just then, a staff member interrupted their conversation. Talking with Aimee left Junko deeply anxious. She desperately wanted to know when Takeo would marry her, yet she deleted the text she'd drafted. She refused to hear Takeo's evasive answers again. She needed a face-to-face response to this question. The next day, Aimee returned to school. The moment Ryota saw her new hairstyle, he couldn't help but compliment how cute it looked. His evasive gaze was thick with shyness. The faint fragrance emanating from him convinced Aimee the boy before her was already hooked. Perhaps because Junko was pregnant, Takeo had become unusually clingy lately. Not only did he come home earlier, but he also helped care for the child. His words were as sweet as honey, and he'd often come over to act affectionate. Aimee endured her physical discomfort, recalling her best friend's repeated warnings. Having resolved to execute her revenge plan, she must not slip up before its completion. Striving to play the role of a happily doted-on wife, she must advance her scheme swiftly. Just then, Ryota proactively messaged Aimee, inviting her to meet at a cafe this weekend. Junko also seemed to notice her son's recent odd behavior. A bottle of men's cologne now sat on his desk. He, who was usually only interested in games, suddenly recalling her conversation with Aimee, which only deepened her unease. With a heavy heart, she opened Ryota's laptop. A suggestive chat log appeared before her eyes, though she didn't know who was on the other end. A powerful sense of dread washed over her. She jotted down the cafe address and meeting time, intending to personally confirm who her son was meeting, but she found the place deserted. By then, the two had already left. Aimee was curious why Ryota suddenly wanted to meet her. It was because last time, when asked about his family situation at Aimee's doorstep, he had been evasive. At that moment, he clearly sensed Aimee was upset. After returning home, he kept reflecting on it. Aimee told him not to misunderstand. With exams approaching, students' family situations could easily affect their performance. Ryota explained it wasn't that he didn't want to talk, but his family situation was complicated and hard to explain in a few words. Aimee asked Ryota if he trusted her. Ryota immediately gave an affirmative answer. As far as he knew, the man who had replaced his father had a family. Such a situation would certainly be despised by others, but he felt his mother wasn't at fault. He could sense that his mother and that man were mutually drawn to each other. Meeting someone you love was the most beautiful thing, even if that man had another family. As long as it made his mother happy, that was enough. Ryota argued that a family-oriented man like Takeo had meticulously cared for Aimee and her son for over a decade, even without a formal marriage. For such an upright man to betray his family, the problem must lie within that family itself. Aimee was shocked by Ryota's worldview, finding it utterly self-centered and full of unfounded assumptions. Why didn't he consider that their own misconduct might be pushing another family into ruin? Aimee clearly senses Ryota's flawed perspective yet can't fully condemn him. Ryota is puzzled by Aimee's intense reaction. It turns out Aimee grew up in a similar family environment. She never knew her father from birth, often seeing her mother hiding to cry in secret. Even after her mother died in a car accident, her father never appeared. It was that very day, through relatives, that she learned she was the product of an affair. Her mother fell for someone she shouldn't have, leading to this situation. While it was oneself who bore the burden of sin at birth, one once believed one didn't deserve to live. Raised with this guilt, one never thought an affair was unavoidable. Fearing one would die alone like one's mother, one always yearned for a happy marriage. A sudden phone call interrupted their conversation. Ryota, filled with unease, asked who Aimee meant by Takeo. Aimee replied, "He's my husband, the man who replaced your father." Ryota was instantly thrown off balance. He demanded Aimee stop joking. Aimee retorted, "Do you really believe such coincidences exist in this world? You destroyed my family. I hate you both. I hate you both." With that, Aimee stormed off without looking back. Junko, unable to find her son, was troubled. She sensed Aimee was somehow involved. If her son had been harmed, she wouldn't let Aimee off easy. Aimee, having calmed down slightly, realized her emotions had gotten the better of her. She hadn't anticipated Ryota lived in a family devoid of guilt. This only fueled Aimee's anger further. Junko tracked down a park near Aimee's home and spotted Takeo alone with the baby. This confirmed her suspicion that Ryota's date was Aimee. She learned from Yoichi that Aimee had gone out with a friend. Even Takeo didn't know which friend it was. He never pried into Aimee's personal life. Junko waited anxiously until late at night for Ryota to return home. Just as she was about to confront him, Ryota headed straight for his bedroom. He opened his laptop to find Aimi had blocked him. A wave of disappointment instantly washed over him. The next day, classmates told him Aimi had quit her job. Reiko thought Aimi had acted far too impulsively. All the groundwork for their revenge plan, built up over so long, had been completely wasted. Ryota would definitely report the situation to his mother. Soon after, Takeo would find out too. Aimi reassured her best friend there was no need to worry. Takeo had already sent a text saying he had something important to discuss that evening. Reiko believed, based on her professional experience, that once a scumbag's misdeeds were fully exposed, they would only feel briefly unsettled. They'd soon adjust their moods. No more hiding. No more lies, they'd actually feel relieved. When he got home that night, Takeo would most likely apologize first. Don't show any mercy now. Their goal was just to lower the compensation amount. Upon learning of Aimi's resignation, her mother-in-law immediately expressed concern. You said you loved your job, why quit suddenly? She urged Aimi to relax, promising unconditional family support through any hardship. Aimi desperately wanted to tell her mother-in-law right then that her precious son had another family outside. Her mother-in-law would surely see right from wrong and stand by her, making Takeo apologize and admit his fault. After this brief fantasy, Aimi quickly pulled herself back to reality. This relationship was probably beyond repair. Just as her best friend predicted, Takeo apologized to Aimi the moment he got home. Takeo said he heard from Yoichi that mom had been crying a lot lately and blamed it all on dad. Though one didn't know exactly what had upset Aimi. As her husband, one felt one should apologize first. Juggling work and childcare must be incredibly stressful. One hoped Aimi would speak up if she felt overwhelmed as family. They would share the burden together. In truth, Ryota hadn't told Junko about the school incident at all. Aimi immediately shared this with her best friend. One wondered if Ryota's lack of time to tell his mother was due to the approaching exams. Reiko dismissed this as unlikely. Ryota lived with his mother. They had ample opportunities to meet, and if he truly wanted to tell her, he could have texted or called. Clearly, Ryota didn't want to bring it up. If that was the case, Reiko thought Ryota showed potential to be on her own side. Analyzing the situation, it seemed highly probable Ryota had fallen head over heels in love. Though it felt unethical, she sensed Ryota still held value. Ryota silently waited outside the office for weeks without seeing any sign of Aimi returning to work. He finally mustered the courage to go directly to Aimi. Junko received a call from the school reporting that Ryota had skipped class without reason and left early. After her initial surprise, Aimi quickly devised a countermeasure. She guessed Takeo probably didn't know she knew Ryota. Takeo defended himself, explaining Ryota was merely the son of a university clubmate he'd met only a few times. To ease the tension, Takeo awkwardly introduced himself and his family to Ryota. He told Aimi to go home first, then pulled Ryota aside under the pretense of catching up. Back home, Yoichi remarked to Aimi that the older man and an older woman looked strikingly similar. This comment unsettled Aimi. Junko might have already caught on. Would she also seek revenge on her son? One who is, after all, every mother's soft spot? Takeo pinned Ryota against the wall and sternly reprimanded him. He had explicitly told them not to approach his residence without permission. Yet, these past few days, both he and Junko had shown up repeatedly. Ryota apologized to Takeo, promising to be more careful next time, but he couldn't help adding, "Your wife is really beautiful." Takeo awkwardly didn't know how to respond. Back home, Aimi curiously asked what Takeo and Ryota had talked about. Takeo vaguely said it was just catching up. Aimi didn't feel comfortable pressing further. Just then, Yoichi wanted milk. Aimi discovered the fridge was empty. She decided to go out to buy some but unexpectedly found Ryota hadn't left yet. Ryota apologized to Aimi for not considering her feelings that day at the beach. After returning home, he kept reflecting on how, despite being the one who strayed, he avoided discussing the affair because the outcome benefited himself. Compared to Ryota's apology, Aimi was more concerned about what he had just discussed with Takeo. I asked him if he really intended to marry mom. And this was the question Aimi had always wanted to know. Takeo's answer remained as vague as ever, but he promised Ryota that between Aimi and his mother, he loved Junko more. He asked Ryota to give him some more time. Ryota knew Takeo's words would deeply hurt Aimi, but he couldn't bring himself to lie. Aimi's sadness lasted only a moment. Suddenly turning to Ryota, she leaned close and asked, "Would you do anything for me?" When Aimi returned home late that night, she overheard Takeo on the phone, his voice sounding extremely agitated. Though she caught only fragments of the conversation, The information was enough to shock her. Aimee couldn't help but ask Takeo who he'd just been talking to. He explained it was work-related. His subordinate had been making frequent mistakes lately, affecting their month-end performance. Though he managed to gloss over it, Takeo still felt uneasy. At this critical juncture, he absolutely couldn't afford any mistakes. He asked Aimee if she was free on Friday, their wedding anniversary. They hadn't celebrated with a meal together in years. To show his sincerity, Takeo planned to choose a high-end restaurant. Incidentally, he also bolstered his image as a good husband in front of his colleagues, adding another layer to his reputation. After returning home, his mother reminded Takeo that it had been ages since he celebrated their anniversary with Aimee. She urged him to choose a gift with genuine care. Idle. She had picked out a diamond accessory and called Takeo over to see it. Treat Miss Aimee well, she advised. That way, we'll all be happy. Ultimately, Takeo selected a 3-Michelin-starred restaurant. Deeply moved, Aimee reflected that they had unknowingly known each other for 17 years. One question had been troubling her lately, and she wanted Takeo's answer. In these 17 years together, had Takeo ever truly loved her? Just then, Aimee's phone rang. The hospital notified her that her grandfather had collapsed. Takeo offered to accompany her, but Aimee declined. She wanted him to stay and seriously consider the question she'd just asked. The doctor informed Aimee that her grandfather's cancer had metastasized, and the prognosis was grim. Aimee felt deeply guilty. Over the years, she had devoted most of her energy to herself, neglecting her grandfather's health. Her grandfather told her not to blame herself. Birth, aging, sickness, and death were all part of life's natural cycle. He knew he didn't have much time left. Before he passed, there was one very important thing he needed to tell Aimee. He asked Aimee if she knew the origin of the bracelet. Aimee only knew it was her mother's keepsake. Her grandfather revealed the bracelet was a token of love given to Aimee's mother by the chairman of Tsukishiro Jewelry. This man named Shota was Aimee's father. Aimee's mother had once worked as a saleswoman at Tsukishiro Jewelry. Unexpectedly, she caught the eye of Shota, the chairman of the Tsukishiro Group. Soon after, she became pregnant with Aimee. Since Shota already had a family, he wanted to terminate the pregnancy, but Aimee's mother insisted on giving birth no matter what. Shota offered her a settlement to sever all ties. The day Aimee's mother died in a car accident, she was reportedly on her way to confront Shota. Details of that crash remain unreported to this day. Tsukishiro Group settled everything with money. After all, if the media dug into the accident, Shota's marital infidelity would inevitably surface. When grandfather learned of Tsukishiro's actions, he was furious. He ordered Shota never to appear before the child again, and refused to let Aimee call such a scumbag her father. As for the money Shota promised Aimee's mother, grandfather kept it safe for her. Shota also left Aimee some shares. Yet even with this immense wealth, Aimee remained profoundly despondent. No amount of money could bring her joy. Aimee suddenly snapped back to reality. Could the money Takeo mentioned on the phone that day be connected to her origins? She recalled how Takeo frequently followed news about Tsukishiro Jewelry and often bought gifts there. But if she herself didn't know this secret, Takeo certainly couldn't have known either. Upon returning home, her mother-in-law inquired warmly about her grandfather's condition. Seeing Aimee's low spirits, she kindly crouched down to comfort her. Aimee couldn't help but feel that though life was tough, she was fortunate to have such a kind and considerate mother-in-law. Just then, her mother-in-law's phone, left on the table, suddenly rang. Aimee instinctively turned to look and accidentally caught sight of several text messages from Takeo. After her mother-in-law left, to confirm her suspicions, Aimee logged into her mother-in-law's social media account on the computer and discovered they had a private chat group. In the group, they were discussing when Aimee's grandfather would die. Aimee found it hard to believe everything up to this point had been an illusion. Junko even directly addressed Takeo's mother as mother-in-law in the group. Intimate photos of the three further proved the mother-in-law had sided with Junko from the start. Haruko returned with pastries and continued feigning concern for Aimee. Aimee played along with the mother-in-law's act. To uncover how they learned oneself's true origins, Aimee subtly probed the mother-in-law about her younger days. Seeking clues, perhaps elated by her impending success, she let her guard down. Haruko, completely unprepared, opened up to Aimee about herself. In her youth, she met Takeo's father at a beauty pageant. They married soon after and had a child, but Takeo's father was a compulsive gambler, racking up massive debts. Ultimately, she chose divorce. Initially, she believed raising Takeo alone would be manageable, but she soon discovered that, no matter how hard she tried, Life remained incredibly difficult. Her heart ached whenever she saw Takeo unable to play happily like other children. Then one day, Haruko spotted a large corporation recruiting housekeepers. She applied on a whim and surprisingly got the job. Thanks to this position, their living conditions gradually improved. Additionally, she befriended an employee at that very company. Aimi sensed that the friend her mother-in-law mentioned might be her own mother. Haruko claimed she had kindly warned that friend that an illicit affair would end badly, but the girl wouldn't listen. And in the end, she was not only abandoned but also lost her job. The truth was, after learning about Shota and Aimi's mother's affair, Haruko secretly gathered evidence by filming them. She then sold the evidence to a weekly magazine, forcing Aimi's mother to sever ties with Shota. After the scandal broke, Haruko was also expelled from Shota's household. This only strengthened Aimi's conviction that the friend her mother-in-law mentioned was indeed her own mother. Later, Haruko accidentally discovered Shota's plan to use money to cover up the existence of his illegitimate daughter, fueling her jealousy further. Then fate intervened. The high school attended by this illegitimate daughter happened to be the same one Takeo attended. Seeing this as destiny's plan, she urged Takeo to pursue Aimi, though Takeo explicitly stated he already liked another girl. Haruko dismissed it, confident Takeo could handle the situation. Initially shocked, Takeo's mother declared, "If he marries that girl, we'll have more money than we could ever spend." Takeo quickly embraced his mother's logic. Poverty was too terrifying a prospect. He abandoned his pursuit of Junko and deliberately drew closer to Aimi, until one day, he unexpectedly encountered Junko again on the street. In that moment, Takeo's mind flashed back to his mother's words. Reiko was furious upon learning of Takeo's scheme. Legally, the money Aimi inherited from her grandfather couldn't be divided with the husband even if they divorced. Takeo and his mother must have other plans to transfer the assets. She urged Aimi to sever ties with Takeo immediately. Reiko had already drafted the divorce papers for Aimi, but Aimi seemed hesitant. She felt Ryota was innocent and hoped to spare him from involvement. Reiko warned Aimi not to show mercy. After all, that high schooler was the son of her husband's mistress. That fact could never be changed. Takeo was again promising Junko that he'd divorce Aimi once she transferred all the stocks to him. Junko had long grown numb to Takeo's so-called promises. Takeo assured Junko that Aimi only appeared shrewd, she was actually a fool. Suddenly receiving a large sum of money would surely overwhelm her. Then, all he'd have to do was tell her it was for financial management, and Aimi would immediately transfer all the money over. Takeo urged Junko to be patient, as the divorce required numerous procedures. They would also need to change Yuichi's registered name to Kazuo. Mentioning Kazuo suddenly alerted Junko. She rushed to Ryota's bedroom and pulled out his test papers. She discovered Ryota's tutor was also named Kazuo. This couldn't be a coincidence. All clues pointed to what Junko suspected. Early the next morning, Ryota packed 2 large bags. Junko asked where he was going, but Ryota ignored her. She urged him to stay clear-headed and not let lust cloud his judgment. Takeo and his mother were his true allies. He mustn't be manipulated by a woman. Aimi's sole purpose was revenge. Ryota declared that he knew everything even if exploited. He accepted it willingly. His words shattered Junko completely. She couldn't comprehend why her son would choose Aimi's side, knowing she was using him. Ryota confronted his mother. "You know Takeo is a married man, yet you maintain an illicit relationship with him. Isn't that wrong in itself? Don't you feel any guilt at all? Just because it's oneself who benefits. Can't you empathize with how painful and desperate it is for the betrayed party? How can you, as the perpetrator, have the nerve to act so righteous?" Junko defended herself, saying she only wanted to find Ryota a father. No matter how hysterically Junko pleaded, Ryota still stormed out the door. Aimi was packing her clothes when the doorbell suddenly rang. With nowhere else to go, Ryota ultimately thought of Aimi. Worried he'd catch a cold in the rain, Aimi found a set of Takeo's clothes and urged him to take a quick shower. The moment she opened the door, Aimi instinctively turned away in shyness. Ryota then smoothly embraced Aimi from behind. At that moment, Aimi recalled her best friend's words. After all, he was the son of the man who had cheated on her. She couldn't falter now. While drying Ryota's wet hair, Aimi asked him what had really happened, because he had promised Aimi last time that he would be her partner, and that he would do anything for her. He decided to distance himself from his mother. This was the best way he could think of to support Aimi. It was all because of his mother's mistake that Aimi had suffered such innocent pain. Ryota offered a sincere apology. Aimi cut him off. Ryota wanted to know what he could do for Aimi to fully forgive them. Himself. Aimee gave no response. When the rain stopped, Aimee still sent Ryota home. Soon after, her grandfather's condition worsened again. On his deathbed, he mustered his last breath to tell Aimee, "I'm sorry," for Takeo and his mother. The day they'd been waiting for had finally arrived. Just as they secretly gloated, a familiar figure entered the funeral hall. It was none other than Aimee's father, Shota. The sudden appearance of a father absent from Aimee's life for over 30 years brought an ominous foreboding. The next moment, Aimee's actions sent waves of unease crashing through them. Unexpectedly, Aimee chose to take the initiative. She told Shota she'd learned her origins from her grandfather, but she was deeply curious about what happened the day her mother was in the car accident. With matters having come to this, Shota had no intention of hiding anything. Coming to attend Aimee's grandfather's funeral, he had prepared himself to confront the past. He intended to tell Aimee the whole truth. 32 years ago, he had fallen for Aimee's mother at first sight. At that time, he had just taken over the Tsukishiro group. His parents had arranged a family marriage for him, one he was not satisfied with. The heavy expectations placed upon him by his elders felt like a mountain crushing him, leaving him breathless. Aimee's mother's companionship had eased that burden, until the day she became pregnant with Aimee. He thought he finally had leverage to negotiate with his father, and demand to marry Aimee's mother. But he was too young at the time, for wealthy tycoons in high society. Love was merely a condiment for life. Marriage had to be tied to interests. Setting aside that Aimee's mother's humble background fell far short of his parents' standards. Now, with the newspaper exposing her affair, his father demanded he sever ties immediately to protect the family's honor, threatening dire consequences if he failed. Left with no choice, Shota had to compromise, until the day of the accident. When Aimee's mother risked everything to find him again, she begged him to secretly see his daughter, just once. As her father, as a mother, she could sense the loneliness deep within Aimee's heart. The wish she made on her 5th birthday was to see her father. In that moment, Shota truly understood both mother and daughter's feelings, but he knew even more clearly that meeting Aimee rashly might bring further misfortune upon this innocent pair. And precisely on that day, Aimee's mother was involved in a traffic accident. This incident still weighs heavily on his conscience to this day, though he knew he had no right to ask Aimee for forgiveness. Shota promised that from now on, whatever Aimee needed from him, he would do everything in his power to help. Aimee insisted there was no need to wait. She had a request right now. She revealed her entire situation to her father. Back home, Haruko, the drama queen, feigned complete ignorance, feigning shock at Aimee being the illegitimate daughter of a tycoon. She subtly hinted that after so many years apart, Aimee and her father must have much to discuss. Aimee stated that since her father hadn't shown his face in over 30 years, there was naturally no emotional bond. Meeting would only lead to talk of money. Haruko inwardly rejoiced everything unfolded exactly as she'd envisioned. After 17 agonizing years, she could finally ascend to the pinnacle of life. Yet she must conceal this joy, keeping it buried deep within. She continued feigning concern, urging Aimee to take care of yourself and move forward. Money matters, she said, could be discussed together later. The immediate priority was to see her grandfather off on his final journey. Haruko had no heart for Aimee or her grandfather at that moment. Her mind was already scheming about where to travel next. Yet dreams are as beautiful as reality is cruel. Suddenly fired by her employer, Haruko was still somewhat stunned, but she quickly recovered after all. A huge sum of money was about to come her way. Perhaps this was fate preparing her for a new life, making her realize she didn't need to work so hard juggling multiple jobs. But when other employers began firing her one after another, she finally sensed something was amiss. Already feeling guilty, Haruko's first suspicion naturally fell on Shota. Returning home, she probed Aimee about what she'd said to her father that day. Haruko felt only that Tsukishiro Group could be behind her string of job losses. Seeing her mother-in-law's distraught state, Aimee had no intention of hiding anything. "You're right, I did it." Hearing Aimee's admission, Haruko nearly fainted from shock. "Why did you do this?" Haruko demanded. Aimee urged her mother-in-law to calm down, offering to reintroduce her as a maid to the Tsukishiro household. That day, Shota learned Aimee's mother-in-law was the one who sold his affair to the weekly magazine. He had no intention of letting her off the hook. Upon hearing this, Haruko's legs gave way, and she collapsed to the floor. Aimee stepped forward to remind her that she'd better think twice about her plans for shopping and traveling. "You'd be wise to abandon every last one of your delusions." Hearing Aimee's words, The mother-in-law's defenses crumbled instantly. She demanded to know why Aimee had deceived her. Aimee couldn't help but marvel at how the mother-in-law could accuse others with such righteous indignation. The commotion outside roused Yoichi. Haruko turned and lashed out at her grandson. She realized too late that she'd already crossed the line. Now that Yoichi despised her, Aimee's last lingering concern was resolved. She seized this chance to sever all ties with the Haruko family once and for all. Meanwhile, the clients Takeo had painstakingly secured began canceling their contracts. Before he could grasp what was happening, a colleague informed him a handsome young man sought him out. That man was Ryota. Takeo appeared flustered by Ryota's sudden visit. Before he could devise a response, Ryota bluntly declared before everyone, "I want you to separate from my mother." With the affair exposed, the image of Takeo as a devoted husband built over decades crumbled completely. Losing his composure, Takeo vented his fury on Ryota. He demanded, "Why couldn't you talk to me privately? Why come to my workplace to harass me? Did you ever consider the consequences?" Ryota had naturally weighed the fallout, but only this approach would make Takeo take the issue seriously. Takeo accused Ryota of being a traitorous, ungrateful bastard. He had actually raised such an ungrateful creature. Takeo's actions convinced Ryota that this time, one hadn't made a mistake. The man before him was utterly unworthy of him and his mother's lifelong trust. Seeing Takeo's true colors, Ryota felt profoundly hurt and helpless. His only confidant now was Aimee. Aimee, himself, had trusted Takeo for a full 17 years, only to receive this outcome. That evening, when Takeo returned home, Aimee had prepared dinner as usual, but today's meal was peculiar, nothing but eggplant. Though I'm not sure what eggplant symbolizes in Japan. Takeo's expression made it clear this wasn't a good sign. He awkwardly praised Aimee's cooking as always being superb. Aimee then casually asked if he thought he was better than Junko. Takeo was stunned. Aimee's expression showed she already knew about Junko. He instinctively tried to make excuses, but Aimee told him not to waste his breath. Had his mother really told him nothing? Takeo hastily pulled out his phone, revealing over a dozen missed calls from his mother. He begged Aimee to calm down and give him a chance to explain, but Aimee slammed a stack of incriminating photos onto the table. Even confronted with this evidence, Takeo refused to fully come clean. Suddenly remembering Yoichi, he tried to appeal to Aimee through his son. Seeing her husband's duplicitous face left Aimee both amused and exasperated. She advised Takeo to focus his energy on caring for Junko's unborn child instead. Only then did Takeo realize Aimee hadn't lied, she truly knew everything. He pleaded with Aimee to consider their 17 years together and grant him a chance to reform. But Aimee produced the divorce agreement she'd already drafted. Both her husband and mother-in-law had received their due punishment. Aimee's next step was to confront Junko, yet Junko beat her to it, falsely accusing Aimee of moral corruption using her position as a teacher to seduce her son. Driven mad, Junko demanded Aimee hand over her son immediately. Ryota had been missing for a week. Now she had every reason to suspect Aimee had kidnapped the high schooler. This was a crime. Did an affair deserve forgiveness just because it wouldn't land her in jail? Aimee was merely letting Junko taste the agony of losing a family member. Knowing she was in the wrong, Junko immediately knelt before Aimee, begging her to return her son. Just then, Ryota appeared before her. Seeing Ryota safe and sound, Junko's expression hardened again, ready to accuse Aimee. Ryota stated plainly it had nothing to do with Aimee. He had run away and never once met her. Junko couldn't understand why Ryota constantly favored Aimee. She must have charmed or threatened him. She began, only to be cut off by Ryota. "Because I fell for her without permission," he stated. Junko felt both anger and amusement at this. She couldn't fathom what charm Aimee possessed to captivate her son so completely. Aimee then mentioned that Junko had helped style her hair, and that it was her own. But Junko never told Takeo about it. The truth was, Junko was deeply insecure. She feared Takeo would become anxious and leave her if he found out. Junko knew being the other woman was shameful. Driven by sensitivity and insecurity, she chose to hide it. Aimee's words cut deep, shattering Junko's defenses. She kept insisting Takeo loved only her, and marriage was inevitable. They had agreed to raise the child together. Seeing his mother still deluding herself, Ryota urged her to wake up. He promised to return to the family, but only on one condition: she must cut ties with Takeo. That man only brings disaster to others. Aimee would soon divorce Takeo. Junko sought out Takeo herself. Naturally, Takeo craved some stability through her. He claimed that after divorcing Aimee, He could marry Junko, but Junko knew the feelings between her and Takeo weren't love at all. They were merely tools for Takeo's mother to fulfill her own selfish desires. Junko felt foolish for being deceived by Takeo for over a decade. In truth, the one Takeo truly loved deep down was Aimi, so from the very beginning, he never seriously considered her situation or feelings. Moreover, Takeo always found excuses to dodge the issue. Takeo instantly realized Ryota must have said something to Junko. He hurriedly defended himself, insisting it wasn't what Ryota thought. A high schooler's mind wasn't fully developed, he must have misunderstood something. Junko heard this and felt both amused and exasperated. As a mother, she certainly didn't consider Ryota a mentally immature high schooler. Instead, she felt profound shame. These self-important adults, had shown less awareness about this matter than a high schooler. With that, Junko rose to leave. Takeo suddenly remembered his trump card, the child growing inside her. Junko told Takeo not to worry, she was no longer alone now. Afterward, a dazed Takeo drowned his sorrows in alcohol on the street. He never imagined things would reach this point. By chance, he encountered Akemi, a junior colleague who had long admired him. Akemi comforted Takeo, insisting that an affair was nothing to be ashamed of. If you've fallen for someone, why suppress it? That's against human nature. Takeo was genuinely shocked by Akemi's words. To express his gratitude, he invited Akemi to dinner. Akemi clarified she wasn't taking sides. She simply believed it was natural for people to crave novelty, especially men who usually looked down on women. At that moment, she had one burning desire. At that moment, she desperately wanted to tell such men, go to hell. Due to the scandal's severity, Takeo was demoted and had his salary cut at work. His colleague Eiji couldn't understand it. He refused to believe Takeo had cheated for money. How many 17-year spans are there in a lifetime? If he hadn't truly loved his wife, how could he have endured those 17 years? The thought was terrifying. If Takeo hadn't genuinely loved Aimi, how could he have persevered all this time? Claiming his mother coveted Aimi's inheritance was merely a shield for his own unfaithfulness. Realizing this now was clearly too late. The next day, Aimi returned home to find the house in shambles. Takeo looked haggard, as if aged 10 years. Seeing the unsigned divorce papers on the table, she demanded when he would sign and give them to her. Takeo knelt again, apologizing and begging for reconciliation. He admitted that, upon reflection, he hadn't appreciated his blessings until now, realizing that his true love was Aimi. He confessed that initially, he'd followed his mother's advice and approached Aimi for money, but living together and having Yoichi, he'd fallen in love with Aimi without even realizing it. Hearing this, Aimi felt a mix of emotions, both amused and bitter. Takeo insisted this time he truly understood his mistakes. From now on, he would be honest and hoped Aimi would give him another chance to redeem himself. In this world, only Aimi and Yoichi mattered to him. Aimi stepped closer and told Takeo that everything she had done wasn't for an apology. It was to exact revenge on them, even if it meant exploiting the innocent Ryota. She wanted Takeo and Junko to taste the bitter flavor of betrayal by someone they trusted most. Now he had the nerve to speak of forgiveness? Not tearing them limb from limb was already an act of mercy. Takeo couldn't comprehend how crucial maintaining one's integrity throughout youth was for a woman. Hearing this, Takeo claimed he understood. He vowed to compensate her and Yoichi tenfold from now on. Yet belated affection is worth less than grass. Apologies alone aren't enough for mistakes, only proper punishment leaves a lasting lesson. Only by knowing the pain of separation could divorce hold any meaning. The day after finalizing the divorce, Aimi planned to leave this city of heartbreak with Yoichi. Just before boarding the car, Ryota called out to her, pleading for her not to go. As long as you're by my side, that's all I need. I won't ask for anything else. Aimi and Ryota apologized, realizing that, in their blind pursuit of revenge, they had dragged an innocent person into the fray. Now that vengeance was achieved, she refused to perpetuate this cycle of misdeed. Post-divorce, Takeo was reassigned to a company gatehouse. Living in dire straits, he couldn't help but recall his wife who once prepared daily lunches for him. His current plight was self-inflicted. Meanwhile, Aimi opened a family-themed cafe in the countryside, gaining modest local fame. Reiko suggested that since Aimi had achieved success in her career, perhaps it was time to consider a new relationship. At this, Aimi couldn't help but blush. Through an introduction from a regular customer at her shop, she had indeed recently met a single father named Asahi. Though slightly less handsome than Takeo, he seemed honest and dependable. Aimi was contemplating giving dating Mr. Asahi a try. Coincidentally, Asahi turned out to be Yoichi's father, just as Aimi was filled with anticipation, ready to take a new step forward. A familiar figure stepped back into her world. Aimi never dreamed she'd encounter Ryota here again after 7 years. Ryota said he happened to be teaching at the local school. Flustered, Aimi fled the scene in a panic. She had chosen to settle in this remote countryside precisely to forget everything from the past. But how did Ryota know her whereabouts? This left Aimi utterly perplexed. What shocked Aimi even more was Ryota finding her again at the coffee shop. Curious, Aimi asked why he'd come to this village. Ryota explained he'd visited during a university training camp years ago. Captivated by the scenery then, he'd actively sought a teaching position here after graduation, though unsure if it was true. Aimi congratulated Ryota on fulfilling his dream of becoming a teacher. Ryota didn't respond to her congratulations but suddenly emphasized he was 25 now. Aimi instantly understood what Ryota was implying. The youthful innocence had indeed faded from his eyes. He told Aimi not to play dumb. She knew exactly what he meant. So why wouldn't she give him a direct answer? All these years, his feelings for her had never changed. Just as he was about to utter something even more sentimental, Asahi and the other parents happened to walk into the shop. Watching Asahi and Aimi chatting and laughing together so naturally, Ryota's face darkened with displeasure. The mothers nearby couldn't help but praise Ryota's handsome looks, surely inherited from his mother's excellent genes. Their conversation instantly dragged Aimi back into unpleasant memories, though Ryota knew these topics were sensitive. His youthful naivety left him unsure how to politely decline the enthusiastic parents. Asahi, however, keenly noticed Aimi's unease. The mothers, seemingly oblivious to the tension, asked Ryota for a photo of his sister and then rushed over to Aimi, showering her with compliments about how adorable she was. Aimi could only force a smile and nod along. After everyone finished their meal and left, Asahi even took the initiative to ask Aimi out for a date alone over the weekend. Ryota immediately shot Asahi a hostile glare, then turned his gaze to Aimi. To his surprise, Aimi actually agreed to Asahi's date request. Ryota looked utterly dejected. On the verge of tears, he left reluctantly, his face etched with bitterness, thinking Ryota would back down. Aimi was surprised when he returned that evening. She hoped Ryota would accept their relationship as parent and teacher. Ryota declared he couldn't accept Aimi dating Mr. Asahi. Aimi declared she wanted to start a new life here. Ryota intended to try one last time, but Yoichi suddenly returned home, forcing Ryota to retreat for now. On Sunday, Aimi closed the shop for the day to meet with Asahi. Yoichi offered support, saying he'd stay at a friend's place tonight and not to worry about him. Asahi remarked how precocious kids are these days. His daughter had said the same thing. Watching his daughter grow day by day, Asahi genuinely wanted to find her a mother. After all, there are many things a girl going through puberty finds hard to discuss with her father. Though she agreed to date Asahi, Aimi still didn't plan to start a relationship with him right away. She told Asahi everything about herself, revealing she was a deeply dark person with an intense desire for revenge. Asahi told Aimi not to blame herself. Truly dark people never feel pain. On the way back, Asahi remained curious about the nature of Aimi's relationship with Ryota-sensei. That day, he could clearly sense Ryota and Aimi acted like old acquaintances. Given that, Aimi saw no reason to hide it. She told Asahi that Ryota had once been her student, and they'd unexpectedly reunited in this rural backwater. As she bid Asahi farewell, Aimi received a text message. Ryota still hadn't given up. He mustered his courage once more, hoping to talk to Aimi. At the same time, Asahi was also confessing his feelings to Aimi. I promise I won't let Aimi get hurt again. Back at the shop, the mothers curiously asked if Aimi had agreed to date Asahi. In the corner, Ryota was even more eager to know the answer. After seeing the parents off, Ryota finally decided to confess his feelings to Aimi. But Aimi had no intention of giving him the chance to speak. Just then, a familiar voice called out from behind them. Seeing Junko, whom she hadn't seen in ages, Aimi panicked and quickly shut the coffee shop door. She was completely unprepared for this sudden turn of events. Ryota resented his mother's sudden visit, feeling as if he'd been under constant surveillance, as if his own self had been under constant surveillance. Junko couldn't understand what charm Aimi possessed that had kept her son's affection undimmed for 7 years. She urged Ryota to wake up. This relationship was inherently twisted and not worth clinging to. The fact that Aimi was Takeo's ex-wife alone made this connection forbidden. Deep down, Ryota understood, but he refused to accept it. Why should he pay for his parents' mistakes? He returned to the cafe to apologize to Aimi. He'd been so careful, yet his mother still tracked him down. This must have caused Aimee trouble, perhaps fearing the loss of his only support. His mother's controlling nature had intensified over the past 7 years. He'd become hypersensitive whenever he interacted with any woman. Now that his sister was 7, she could easily manage without his care. That's why he'd come to the city without telling his mother. Aimee seemed to grasp what Ryota was trying to convey, yet she couldn't offer any response. As she tried to leave, Ryota pulled her back into his arms. He understood Aimee's predicament and wasn't demanding an answer. He only hoped she would fulfill their promise from 7 years ago. After getting into university, accompany him to the aquarium in Kanagawa Prefecture. Faced with Ryota's earnest gaze, Aimee found herself unable to refuse. Meanwhile, Junko had no choice but to seek help from Takeo. After his divorce, Takeo's home was a chaotic mess, piled high with trash. After being disciplined by Aimee, Haruko had become much more subdued. She locked herself in her room all day, unwilling to speak to anyone, even to herself. Learning about Ryota and Aimee's situation left Takeo utterly stunned. The usually slow-witted Takeo finally grasped the truth. Junko urged Takeo to think it through. If Ryota and Aimee truly got together, it would inevitably make everyone's relationships even more complicated. Public opinion would be impossible to control. She wanted to prevent the situation from escalating and hoped Takeo would cooperate. By the weekend, Aimee found herself dressing up without thinking. Yoichi mistakenly believed his mother was going on a date with Asahi. At the meeting spot, Aimee still decided not to give Ryota any hope. She smiled and told Ryota there was absolutely no possibility between them. No need to waste time or energy. After saying this, Aimee turned and walked away decisively. Unexpectedly, a heavy rain suddenly poured down. Ryota grabbed Aimee's arm and sought shelter. They ended up at an abandoned apartment building. Seeing Ryota drenched, Aimee couldn't help but show concern. This scene instantly pulled the boy's thoughts back 7 years. Aimee was still as gentle and captivating as ever, making Ryota even more unwilling to give up. He was convinced Aimee was his destined person. The boy's earnest gaze made Aimee unable to meet his eyes. She instinctively turned away. Ryota insisted that Aimee needn't hide her emotions. They weren't the ones at fault, why should they bear another's guilt? If Aimee insisted on shouldering all blame, he'd gladly share it with her. An ambiguous atmosphere instantly filled the room. Just as their lingering moments were cut short, an untimely phone call shattered everything. Yoichi discovered his mother wasn't actually on a date with Mr. Asahi today. He urged her to come home early to be with oneself, especially since it was pouring outside. This call caused Aimee's rationality to once again give way to her emotions. After hastily apologizing to Ryota, she fled the scene. The feelings she had suppressed for 7 years were finally exposed. She didn't know how to face Ryota next, nor how to respond to Asahi's confession. Just as she was caught between a rock and a hard place, Asahi took the initiative to reveal that he had actually witnessed Ryota hugging Aimee that day. He promised to keep it confidential, though he remained curious about the nature of Aimee and Ryota's relationship. With matters having reached this point, Aimee had no choice but to reveal the entire truth to Asahi. Hearing this, Asahi felt even more heartbroken for Aimee. He believed Aimee shouldn't bear the guilt alone. Like her, he too had been betrayed, so he understood that pain. There was no need to sink back into pointless emotional turmoil. Aimee understood Asahi's unspoken warning. Pursuing a relationship with Ryota would inevitably bring unhappiness. Yoichi confronted Ryota, demanding he stop harassing his mother. He explained that upon returning home that day, he'd overheard fragments of a conversation between Ryota and his mother. Though he couldn't grasp the exact meaning, he sensed his mother's intense resistance. Not wanting to cause her further distress, he pleaded with Ryota to leave her alone. This scene mirrored his own past attempt to persuade Takeo to stay away from his mother. The next day, Aimee learned from Asahi that the coffee shop had been flooded with negative reviews online. Asahi advised her to report it to the police, warning that rumors would spread quickly in this small town. Aimee hesitated, worried that if Junko was the culprit, reporting it could jeopardize Ryota's job. Seeing her indecision, Asahi grew frustrated. He asked if she'd considered Yoichi's feelings. What treatment would Yoichi face if the rumors spread? Asahi's point was undeniable. The coffee shop's business deteriorated rapidly, and Yoichi soon faced ostracism from classmates. Ryota also desperately wanted to know if his mother had sent the threatening letters. To help Aimee uncover the truth, he bought a ticket back to Tokyo that very night, determined to confront his mother. But the moment he opened the door, a foul stench hit him. The house was in utter disarray. Junko lay motionless, face down on the table. After confirming his mother still had a pulse, Ryota asked where his sister was. Junko suddenly became agitated. "It's been 7 years," she cried. "Why won't you leave me alone?" It turned out someone had recently posted multiple negative reviews on her hair salon's official website. Soon, these rumors spread to her daughter's kindergarten. Junko had no choice but to take her daughter out of school for an extended period and send her back to their hometown. She was convinced Aimi was behind it all. Ryota's words made Junko doubt herself. Learning Aimi had received threatening letters, Junko recalled receiving many herself. Ryota noticed the style matched Aimi's letters exactly. Perhaps he had wrongly accused his mother. The culprit behind these threats clearly targeted both his mother and Aimi. He wanted to tell Aimi immediately, but his mother grabbed his arm. Junko had lost everything. She couldn't bear to lose her only son too. Ryota still decided to move out on his own, though this trip home hadn't uncovered the real culprit. At least it confirmed the perpetrator despised both Aimi and his mother, seeking to ruin both their reputations simultaneously. After much deliberation, Ryota found Takeo highly suspicious. Could it be that he had exploited this wave of public opinion to convince Aimi to reconcile with him? So he went straight to Takeo's residence. Facing Ryota's accusations, Takeo looked utterly bewildered. He insisted he had no reason to hurt Aimi again, but Ryota pointed out that only a handful of people knew his sister was illegitimate. Takeo conceded Ryota's reasoning made sense. Just then, Haruko abruptly opened the bedroom door. She berated her son for still being unable to let go after 7 years. Haruko urged him to turn himself in at the police station, warning him not to let hatred blind him any longer. Just then, Aimi appeared. She told her mother-in-law to stop playing games. "Have you forgotten my father is the chairman of Tsukishiro Group? Have the legal department request information disclosure. The truth will surface quickly." And we recovered fingerprint evidence from the threatening letters. Initially, Aimi had suspected Junko, but 7 years ago, Junko chose Ryota over Takeo. Only Haruko had a prior record. To achieve her goals, she'd exploit her own son. Seeing no point in defending herself, Haruko dropped her facade. She believed this was nothing but karma. It was all Aimi's fault for making her endure 7 years of hell. Unable to find any job, she was ridiculed wherever she went. Ryota couldn't understand Haruko's motive for targeting his mother. Haruko grew even more displeased at the mention of Junko's name. Back then, it was Takeo and Junko who had the affair. Why had Junko faced no punishment these past 7 years, running her barbershop as if nothing had happened? On this point, Haruko believed Takeo was the real culprit. If he had cooperated with her plan and married Aimi back then, none of this would have happened. Aimi urged Haruko to go to the police station and turn herself in. Unable to accept defeat, Haruko grabbed a knife from the sink and lunged at Aimi. Takeo declared that everything was their own fault. It was merely the loss of a job and social standing. If they could let go of their hatred, everything could still turn out for the better. Yet Haruko remained convinced that she was blameless and stormed out. Unexpectedly, she encountered Shota downstairs. Shota hadn't anticipated Haruko's stubbornness. It seemed her punishment back then had been too lenient. This incident not only showed Aimi that Takeo was genuinely remorseful, but also Ryota's actions deeply moved Aimi. Yet Junko called with a death threat against Ryota. When they rushed to the rooftop, only a pair of shoes remained on the ground. Junko hadn't jumped, she merely wanted to test whether Ryota truly cared. Her state seemed unhinged. She claimed Ryota's eyes resembled her father's, the man who deceived her during university. When Junko saw that man again, he already had a new girlfriend. Her ordeal reminded Aimi of her own past. In that moment, she felt a deep, visceral empathy for Junko. Junko didn't want to lose Ryota again. Back then, she had chosen her son over Takeo. Now she hoped Ryota would choose himself. Yet Ryota still refused to forgive his mother. He believed she had caused Aimi immense pain until the very end. Watching her son take Aimi's side so completely, Junko broke down again. She insisted it wasn't herself who had seduced Takeo. She too had been deceived by his sweet talk. She was just a naive romantic. Once she saw Takeo's true colors, she walked away without hesitation. Why was Aimi now trying to take her son? Seeing Junko completely lose her composure, Aimi slowly approached. Aimi said, "Oneself." Understanding Junko's feelings, both had been hurt by men, their eyes clouded by hatred. But she now realized revenge only bred more pain, serving no purpose. There were no winners in this. They were both already punished. So Aimi urged Junko to let go of her hatred. Junko demanded to know what she should do now. Faced with this question, Aimi didn't know how to answer. Ryota walked over and embraced his mother. He urged Junko to start learning how to care for oneself from today onward. A woman can live well without a man. Thus, a world where only Junko remained wounded was achieved. Back in the countryside, Asahi urged Aimi to let herself off the hook. Let the past stay in the past, no need for constant mental exhaustion. Only by opening her heart to embrace the future could she possibly find happiness again. Asahi's words awaken Aimi. She decides to formally accept Ryota. She confesses to herself that she had long been in love with him, but always felt her own darkness made her unworthy. So she deliberately kept her distance. Ryota rises excitedly and pulls Aimi into his arms. He promises he will always protect her. Ryota asks Aimi to give him some time. He planned to return to the big city to further his studies and become stronger, so he'd have the ability to protect Aimi. Aimi desperately wanted to remind him that he was a wealthy woman and he didn't need to strive so hard. But seeing his ambition, she didn't want to dampen his enthusiasm. Time flew by, and a year later, Aimi encountered Shota while visiting her mother-in-law's grave. Curious, she asked about her late mother-in-law's current situation. Shota wondered why Aimi cared about someone who had repeatedly hurt her. Though she had taken her mother-in-law to the police station that day, Aimi hadn't pressed charges, so the mother-in-law was released without charges, and Shota rehired her. However, Shota told Aimi that some people simply couldn't change. Junko had also let go of her hatred and moved on with her life. Takeo worked tirelessly to provide child support for both children. Yoichi's rebellious phase arrived a bit early. He began to grow impatient with Aimi's nagging, yet when he turned to see Asahi's daughter, his demeanor changed completely. Reiko had now become a highly capable lawyer in her own right. Soon after, Ryota returned from further studies and began living a shameless life with Aimi.